Anyway, I'd call this meeting to order, and I'd call on Commissioner Purcell for a quorum.
Oh, sure. Sorry,
That's all right.
where's the list?
Right, couple under I or right in there, right here.
Well, you hand it to me. Just give it,
It's
slide it
on-
over, slide it over. Chairman Sukor,
Here.
Kellen Lancaster,
Here.
Mike Purcell here, Gerald Geis,
Here.
Clinton Glick,
Excused?
Mark Cott,
Here.
Sheridan Little,
Excused?
Rod Wagner,
Here.
Bill Yankee. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Commissioner Purcell. Moving on, we have also an audience introduction, and we could start with Katie over here.
Katie Talbot, Water Development Office.
Josh Anderson, LSO.
Abigail Bodewines, LSO.
Larry Hicks, Senate District 11.
Dan Doxter, District 16, Lincoln Teton Sublette.
Rod Wagner, Wyoming Water Development Commissioner, District 1.
Kellen Lancaster, Wyoming Water Development Commission, District 4, Western Wyoming.
Larry Suker, Commissioner, WWC, and District representing District 2.
Mike Purcell, I'm the at-large member for the Water Development Commission.
Gerald Geis, District 3, Bighorn Basin in Fremont County.
Andrew Coleman, Wyoming Attorney General's Office.
Bill Yankee, Water Commissioner, Division 3.
Mark Cott, Water Commissioner, Division 4, Western Wyoming.
Ogden Driscoll, Senate District 1, Select Water.
Wyatt Agar, Senate District 20, Select Water Committee.
Glenn Moniz, Senate District 10, Select Water Committee.
Jerry Paxton, House District 47, Select Water.
Jason Mead, Water Development Office.
Jody Preen, Water Development Office.
Brian Clerkin, Water Development Office. Barry Lawrence, Water Development Office. Greg Kerr, University of Wyoming Office of Water Programs.
Chris Nicholson, Water Resources Data System.
Well, we just argue among ourselves. We don't have any audience.
Thank you. I want to start out by a special thanks to anyone that was involved in our tour yesterday. I thought it was great. Even the weather cooperated with us. So a little dusty at times on the road, but we could stand that. We're used to it. But other than that, and I don't see anybody here, but if they are here, I really believe that we should give even our internal people for the organization and a little bit of a hand here for what was done yesterday. And I also want to say thank you to the county commissioners for the great meal we had last night. I'm not a sheep fan, never have, but I might come back now. And the other thing I want to announce, that fellow Commissioner Sheridan Little was blessed with a pair of twins yesterday. So congratulations to Sheridan. And I think they were both boys, is that correct, Katie? So, what a deal. So moving along, we'll go ahead and do our approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, one at a time, or both at the same
Yeah,
time?
probably one at a time if we have two different workshops, so, yeah.
Okay, I would move approval for the May 16th workshop minutes.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved by Chairman, or Commissioner Purcell, seconded by Rodney Wagner, Commissioner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. And now we have the second set of joint meeting minutes to vote on.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the May 17th, 2019 joint meeting minutes.
And is there a second? Been moved by Commissioner Yankee, seconded by Lancaster, Commissioner Lancaster. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Item 5, consideration of recommendations for reservoir O&M accounts. Jason, I believe you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you recall, on Wednesday, we spoke about the 9 different reservoir O&M accounts that the state has and that have been set up. The only one that we suggested we take action on was the Buffalo Bill Dam account. We felt like there was excess funds available in that account, and we're asking that they be moved to account number 2. And then the other 8 accounts, we felt that they were stable and that no excess funds were available at this time to move. So we would just ask for your favorable consideration of that move from Buffalo Bill account to account 2, and then we will, through the November meeting and then into the omnibus construction bill, will reflect that as needed.
Second. Mr. Chairman, real quick.
Any discussion?
I just apologize, I didn't hear a dollar amount.
Mr. Chair, 7 million.
Sorry
Sorry about that, yeah.
Yes, 7 million. Moved by Commissioner Lancaster, seconded by Commissioner Wagner. All those in favor, or are there other discussion before we go for the vote? Question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. Okay, we go into construction amendments, and there again, we'll call on Jason.
Mr. Chairman, this is for the Cokeville Tri-Diversion Structure Project, just a rehab of a diversion structure. And this was just a simple oversight that we're correcting. In the original agreement, the incorrect statutes, governing statutes were included. So the irrigation district statutes were included rather than the watershed improvement district statutes. So we're just making this quick correction on the agreement. So we'd ask for your favorable consideration of that as well.
Forward with what Jason has presented to us.
Moved by Commissioner Lancaster, seconded by Commissioner Yankee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
Jason, on the $7 million transfer, I guess this is not a joint meeting, is it? I was wondering if you needed some sort of approval by Select Water Committee or anything for that, or probably not, probably not, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, it'll eventually have to be approved by the legislature in the omnibus construction bill, I believe, so.
okay, before we go into the next item, I just want to reiterate, by looking at our schedule today, we have picked a time in which to be out of here by 11 a.m. So that's kind of our schedule. If it runs over, that's fine, but if it's less, that's fine too. But our goal is, and I know a lot of you travel long ways, got a long way to go home, so in some cases, 7 hours. And I know it's a weekend. So what we're going to try and do is keep our schedule rolling, and our goal is 11. That work?
Mr. Chairman, I think we had a lot of discussion on Wednesday, so that should be very achievable, if not sooner.
All right, thank you. So, moving into the next item of business, we'll have updates of Level 3 construction projects.
Mr. Chairman, under tab R of your notebook, we have construction progress updates since the May meeting. We have 13 projects to report on. We have 3 projects that have sponsors signed their engineering agreements. We have 2 projects that the sponsors signed their construction contracts, and then there's 8 projects that are going to close out. The first project in your notebook is the Hart Mountain Irrigation District Rattlesnake Liner Replacement Project. This is a Hart Mountain Irrigation District is the sponsor. This project is the design and construction of approximately 2,000 feet of a concrete canal liner system that was originally constructed back in 1938. You can see the funding there is a $2.7 million total appropriation, 67% loan, 67% grant, 33% loan. This came from rehabilitation account 2. The session law was 2018 with a reversion date of July 1st of 2023. For those new to the program, or Commissioner Cott, we have 5 years to complete a project from the session law, so July 1st is the reversion date for this particular project. So this project is advanced to the engineering, the design phase. The sponsor has hired JUB Engineering. They have a design fee of $160,030, and they have a construction management fee of $184,562. Total engineering fee is $344,592. And I'm just going to keep skipping through unless somebody has any questions. Feel free to interrupt me. The next project is a Newcastle Well 2018 project. This is a project to connect a level 2 well to the City of Newcastle system. It includes a SCADA system as well as 4 buildings. So this project is advanced to the engineering phase also. The City of Newcastle signed their engineering agreement with the Engineering Associates. Design fee was $47,830. Construction fee was $31,585 with a total engineering fee of $79,415. The next project is the Northwest Rural Water System Improvements 2019 project. This is design construction of approximately 15,000 feet of 6-inch pipe, as well as a pump station. This project is also advanced to the design phase. The sponsors signed their engineering agreement with Dowell. I have a design fee of $81,140, construction management fee of $149,200. Total engineering fee of $230,340. The next project is the Casper Zone 2 2015 project. This project is construction of approximately 13,000 feet of 12-inch pipe on the west side of Casper. This project is advanced to the construction phase. We had a bid opening on May 14th of this year. We had 7 bids received. The range of bids were between $1.2 and $1.6 million. Engineer's estimate was slightly above $1.5 million, and the contractor's contract amount was for $1,175,880. The next project is the Cowley Tank 2017 project. This project involves construction of a 500,000-gallon tank, approximately 2,300 feet of transmission pipe, and a disinfection facility. This project advanced to the construction phase. We had a bid opening on May 30th of this year. 3 bids were received. The range of bids were $3.5 to $4.3 million. Engineer's estimate was just slightly above $3.4 million, and the contract amount was for $3,499,828.72. The next project is the Midvale Pilot 27A lateral. This project was to place approximately 1.65 miles of canal into pipe. This is a materials-only contract. So for the materials-only contract, as a reminder, the WWDC reimburses the sponsor 100% for the materials, and the sponsor is responsible for the labor, construction, equipment, and engineering associated with the project. So this project, this is a closeout project. If you look at the bottom of your sheet there, the final project cost was $213,375.64, and that was our matching amount for the materials. We reverted back into account 2, $141,624.36. The next project is the Newcastle 2015 project. This is the design construction of a 10-inch transmission pipeline, rehabilitation of a well, including pumping equipment, pump house, and pump controls. This project is also being closed out. The total project costs were $936,500. WWDC's funding share was $616,400. Sponsor provided $320,100. Our expenditure matched the grant amount, so there's no reversion back into account 1.
Mr. Chairman, as I recall, there were 2 warring water districts up there. Are they included to get water from either one of these Newcastle projects?
The Newcastle project will assist in providing water. As you're well aware, there's several wells associated with the Newcastle water supply system, and so again, it will supplement the city supplies to those. The Cambria and Sweetwater Irrigation District for their supply waters.
Thank you.
Brian, may I interrupt? Your speaker is coming off and on. I don't know why, but
Slide it closer to you.
About now. Okay. Next project is the Pine Bluffs North Wellfield project. This is design construction of a new well as well as rehabilitation of an existing well, and then connection pipeline to the system. So this project is advanced to the project closeout phase. Total project cost is $1,898,836.66. WWC's funding share was $1,483,832.15. So we reverted back into account $1,816,167.85. Next project is a Side Irrigation District Rehabilitation 2016 project. This is again another project to put open channel into pipe. This is again a materials only contract. Project closeout costs were $229,323.61, and that was our funding share also. So we're reverting back into account 2, $123,176.39. The next project is a Side Irrigation District Rehabilitation 2018 project. This is another open channel to pipe project. This is another materials project also. This project, total project cost was $833,736.45. Our funding share was $823,000. So our expenditures matched the grant amount, and so there was no reversion back into account 2. And if you notice there that there's about a $10,000 difference between the final project cost and our funding share, and that was an overrun that the sponsor covered on the project. The next project is a Sheridan 4 million gallon tank project. This is a project that we replaced a roof on the Sheridan's water storage tank. This is a project closeout. Final cost was $2,615,511.72. WWC's funding share was $1,752,392.88. We had a reversion back into account 2 of $391,607.12. The next project is the Shoshone Transmission Pipeline 2016 project. This project was the design construction of approximately 16,000 feet of 16-inch pipe. This project is in the full closeout phase. We had a total project cost of $4,896,128.58. WWC's funding share was $1,615,722.37. We reverted back into account 1, $611,777.63. The last project is the Thermopolis Pipeline Replacement Project. This is to replace a 50-year-old pipe, asbestos pipe, with a 12 and 16-inch PVC pipe. The project closeout final cost was $2,598,088.83. Our funding share was $1,545,200. And the WWC cost, our expenditures matched the grant amount, so there was no funds returned back to account 2.
Commissioner?
Brian, going back to the Casper one where the bid is so radically different than the engineer's estimate of about 15%, you feel confident about that contractor being able to do that job? Sorry that it's so far back, but City of Casper putting in 13,000 foot of pipe and engineer's estimate 1.5 and the contractor's 1.1, about a 20%.
Yeah, so on these particular, when we have a bid opening, the engineer reviews those bids and looks for any If there's any errors or omissions, and there was their recommendation to award to Trito Construction. Obviously, they're looking at bonds and insurance to make sure that they have the capacity, and that was the recommendation of the engineer. So we're comfortable with their engineer's recommendation.
Thank you. If we're bonded and insured, let them try it.
Brian, I have a question. Do you have a total on the reverted funding of all the projects?
Do.
The other question is, would they all go back into the same account?
Do go back into the same account. Well, I thought I did. Mr. Chairman, if I could, I know I've got that information. It's probably in my notebook behind, in my briefcase, and if you give me a minute, I can provide those numbers.
Be fine. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make the comment that I think the amount of those reversions show that we are watching our money carefully, and that those reversions coming back to the account are
Good news.
ready for reinvestment. So I think we should be pleased with the process.
Mr. Chairman, if we want to move on, I can
You can
provide that.
continue on, Jason, because if it takes him a little bit, that's fine. So, into the next one, we're into item number 8, consultant selection process schedule.
Mr. Chairman, obviously I brought this to the table. I did so thinking that if there would be a consensus to change our selection process, it should probably happen at this meeting. Obviously, we don't have a consensus, so I will not be making any motions. But I do believe that as we move forward, we need to continue to monitor potential improvements to the process. In particular, I do have a concern that not having individual project budgets opens up the process for consultants and sponsors to pad the project and the scopes. I also think it makes it, by having those individual budgets, it does help signal the intent of the commission as it relates to the level 1 studies and our willingness to invest in those studies to a upper limit. The selection process is then used through competition to get a fair price. So that's one of the things I'd like to continue to monitor. The other thing is my concern that by having a selection process before we have the money approved by the legislature, in the long term could curtail the interest of consultants participating in the program. We are asking them many times to spend $5,000 to $20,000 without 100% certainty that there will be an award for the project. And I'm wondering, as we go on, if consultants will start to feel that their marketing dollars are better spent elsewhere. So those are my two concerns, and I think Barry did a good job providing us some data on the process comparisons, and I would urge the staff to continue to monitor the process, and perhaps we can use that information to make a decision one way or the other, or in fact find a process that's better than either one. But and I also think that probably having this debate postponed until we have a new director is a positive step. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I have no motion to make.
The consensus of the other members of the commission, you okay with what was addressed? With that, we will continue on. And I guess I would agree with that. I think we get another year under our belt to help monitor, decide, make sure that we're working with the staff on what may be the best. So I agree wholeheartedly with your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to discussion. No, we're on operating criteria changes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll hand it over and Brian can finish up that question real quick.
So, Mr. Chairman, in response to your question, under account one, again, these are for the projects that were closed out. The total appropriation amount was $5,079,000, and of that $5 million of the original appropriation, we reverted back into account one, $1,126,561.14. And then under account two, the total appropriations was $5,284,600, and reverted back into account two, $957,792.21. And so that represents about, reverted back into account one about 22%, reverted into account two of the original appropriation about 18%.
Thank you, Brian. I think those numbers do mean that we are watching, and you guys are doing a great job. So,
Thank you.
With that said, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, for those of you that might be concerned that those are too high, please understand that each of our construction budgets do have contingency funds in them, and of 15%. So what that does tell us is, in many cases, we haven't had to use those contingency funds. So therefore, the reversion's in the ballpark of 15 to 20%.
Thank you. Okay, so we're into discussion.
Mr. Chairman, operating criteria change. Sorry, I got us off track by going backwards there for a second.
We'll be back on the operating. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, again, we had this discussion on Wednesday. I'd refer everybody to tab N for Nebraska.
Oh, my God. You know, Mr. Chairman, I don't mind the Nebraska digs every once in a while, but it is getting a little close to football season for us to have to live with this day in, day out. Could we just have it once a day? I mean, we had to watch that hat all day.
Yeah, we did. That's my comment. That red hat, where is it?
All right, so again, this is just information or language that we want to add to the criteria. It basically just effectuates what was in Senate File 54 last year and the language that then in turn got incorporated into Title 41 that spells out when an operation and maintenance account would be required of a sponsor in a Level 3 project. So on the page on tab N, if you flip to the back of that first page, again, that language in red is what we want to add to Chapter 4. And it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if we need to go through it again, but we would just ask for your approval to add that language. I don't think it needs to be anything significant through our office. Again, we're just reflecting the language that came out of the statutes, and we would put a new version of the criteria online and point out what that change was so folks are aware of that on our website.
I would make that motion. We accept a new add-on to the project thing.
Operating criteria.
Operate.
I second.
Been moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Purcell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So we'll move on to item 10, which is discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks?
I've actually, I know I visited with one of you, but I've actually sit here and gone through my email, and I have another thing. So there's 3 items I'd like to put on for a discussion with the commission. Number one, we've talked about, we left with the presentation from GID on the tunnel collapse in Goshen County, but there was never any discussion with the commission or Select Water as to what potential solutions and alternatives and processes that we may pursue to address that issue. So that would be number one that I would like to add to discussion. Number two is the members that were on the committee and the commission last year. You'll remember our August meeting was in Gillette, and there was quite a bit of discussion on the Gillette-Madison project and those wells. Would like an update at November as to status of that. And the reason that I'd like a status is at that point in time last year, there was $17 million still sitting in that Gillette-Madison account. The project was done. The reason we left that money sit there last session was to address this issue of the integrity of those wells. If that's completed, I'd like to see those funds revert back to the account instead of just sit with the city of Gillette in that Gillette-Madison project. So if we can get an update on that and the status of those funds for the November meeting, and we can have that discussion. The only other thing I have on there is I have got a letter here from the city of Gillette, or from the city of Sundance, and it deals with the Sundance tank. And Mr. Chairman, I think if we just go through those other items, then we can discuss that. But first, I think a little discussion would be appropriate on us as to what we want to do with the tunnel collapse in Goshen County. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just make a suggestion for discussion's sake. After discussing this with you this morning and some other individuals, so we know we're going to have some expenditures there, and there's going to be a request there. The question is does the commission want them to get in line in the normal process? So that's part of it. So if that's the case, then they would have to have an application in by September 1st for level 3 funding. Now, we don't know a lot of what the costs are going to be associated, but at least it's a placeholder that they've followed through with the process. As we move through there, then we're obviously going to come back with recommendations once we know some final design. The other alternative would be just to wait and do nothing and then get to November, and then it becomes a process of the Select Water Committee inserting some. So I guess would like some discussion as to what's the pleasure of the commission. Do you want them to get in line through that normal process and get an application into the office by September 1st?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Purcell, Commissioner?
You know, I think what we need is for them to make an application. And here's where I want to give it some extra thought. I think they should ask for everything that they need, okay? With the understanding that we're probably not going to be able to provide it all. But that would at least give us the full picture. You know, there's issues that right now we can't do. We can't reimburse them for what they've been doing. That we under our existing criteria, and I think even statute, we can look forward and help with long-term repairs. But to the fact that our program, I don't think, can provide through our best loan grant mix, provide enough to make it affordable, but we can certainly participate. So, but if we don't know the entire picture, and you know, I'd suggest to GID they give us the entire picture with the understanding that we aren't going to be able to do everything that they need. But if they document what they need, it does help future discussions, whether it be the emergency fund or that we were talking about perhaps doing a statutory revision that would make irrigation districts available. I don't know if that's possible, but I think it would help us as a commission to know the problem, would help the Select Water Committee to know what, if any, statutory changes were needed, and to have the debate as to whether this program is going to start being responsive to emergencies. So, or if not this agency, who and where is the funding coming from? So, Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, I do think that we should see that kind of input from GID. But I think, Rod, if you would, pass on that we're not going to be able to do everything, but we would like to see the big picture. Okay? Documented through an application.
Senator Doug Sitter.
Commissioner, follow up, and I was listening in to this conversation on the internet a couple of days ago. I too felt like maybe we walked away without resolving it. In respect to Commissioner Purcell's concerns, can we have that big picture by September 1st? November?
I don't think you're gonna be able to see that big a picture till the end of the year, maybe even.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it would be nice to have it for our November meeting.
We'll have an update.
At least if you would give us, if they could give us an update of what they know and what they don't know in November, in written form, kind of the budget, where they've spent, up to date, what they anticipate for the temporary fix, what their engineers are telling them they're going to need for the permanent fix, if there is a permanent fix needed. There might have to be a complete test of the temporary fix to see if it's going to hold water, so to speak. But I think we need the information to make informed decisions.
Mr. Chairman, as I walk through the process, this is what I think is important, and it would be, I guess, my recommendation that we ask them just to get the application as a placeholder. And the reason that I think that's important, because that keeps the commission engaged through this entire process. If we wait till November and we slip it in, basically that goes around the commission and it just becomes a function of a Select Water sticking something in when there was no application. So I think it formalizes it, and going forward, I think we try to get some consistency. But I think because this is going to be a big fix, and keep in mind, we're only talking about 53% to the state of Wyoming. But some of the very preliminary estimates that I've been told is going to be probably for a permanent fix could be $15 to $20 million. Wyoming would be on the hook for 53% of that. Discussions I've had with the governor that the Bureau of Reclamation may or may not, but it may be up to a maximum of 30%. So there's all these things out there. But I think just having that application in place keeps the commission engaged in those discussions. It's the established process. If we have some other mechanism a year ago from exigency funding or whatever happens with that, I just think that the nature of this project is not something that we're not going to deal with again and again and again. But I think this starts to initialize that process. So I think it would probably be the best mechanism. And the reason is because I don't want to direct any criticism at this in the future that either the legislature tried to subvert and go around the Select Water Committee, or that GID didn't follow the process. We can just take all of that stuff off the table and say, look, and I think, a question for Jason is, given the short turnaround of September 1st deadline, would he have staff to be able to help them? I mean, they're not extensive applications, but quite frankly, these people are overwhelmed right now. And so that if we could have staff assist with putting that application together to get that. But I do think it's important that we keep the commission involved in this process and every step. That application does that.
Chairman.
Senator Driscoll.
A little follow-up on that, and I totally agree. I think it needs to be in a couple pieces on their update. One is what the temporary fix is anticipated to cost, but also rough estimates going ahead. The one thing this committee does, and we can forward that by getting an application, We know from looking at the books, the engineering cost on this thing is gonna be several $1 million. And that is something that we do right now, and we need an application in so that we can assist them in paying for that engineering, because the level 1 studies we do, we fund at 100%, and we've done it for a long time. And I would suggest we immediately move to, as quickly as possible, get them to a level 1 on the permanent fix, and probably look at the other tunnels as well. We know at this point we got a problem with another one, and hiding from a problem never fixes a problem. And so to me, I think it's very appropriate to go to 100% on a level 1 on these costs immediately at this next meeting, and if staff can get it there so we can get, this thing, if we drag another year out, we got crop problems now, but if we get into next year, this deal looks tiny this year. And to me, it's just imperative that we do it, and that's one thing we can legally do. We can step in and get that engineering done for GID. And we need to be careful how we do it so we can be reimbursed by the feds or anybody else, so that we as a group can be as whole as possible. But get that ball rolling and get it done now, because engineering's not a 30-day engineering on these deals. So my recommendation would be to split it in pieces and ask them for what they've got in it for the temporary, give a seat of the pants estimate on the other, and let's get an engineering firm hired and start figuring it out, because someone's got to engineer it. It's not going to be pulling in with a bulldozer. So that would be my thoughts, is to turn this into a concrete action item and get the engineering moving.
The one concern that I have, should any of this be contingent on support from Nebraska?
Chairman, I feel like anything that's done has to be dealt with immediately with Nebraska, probably with their district and their delegation as well. But if they refuse to pay on the thing, then there's an immediate problem, because including the engineering on this, they need to pay their 48% or whatever it is. They're going to have to help pay for it. They get the water, and it may be such a deal that there's no O&M on their water if they're not wanting to pay. But
Mr. Chairman, so the discussions that I've been involved in, Nebraska has funding available for these type of things. The trouble is it's going to have to go back to the legislature, because that funding was specified within the city or within the boundaries. So they never anticipated that they were going to have failure of their delivery system outside of the state boundaries. So the discussions with the legislative members of Nebraska is there's money there, but there's going to take a little legislative authorization. So I think their process is going to be similar to ours that we're talking about, but the fact is they do have an account for these type of things. So again, I think those are details that can be worked out. The important thing now is just to get that application into the commission so that we're at least following established process and precedents.
So with that said, you feel like we would fund the upfront 100% for the restoration for what we need to do, and then ask for reimbursement at a later date. And I think we have to counsel them if that's what we need to do, because you're not going to go build that tunnel on half the money when you're not going to get Nebraska's money for a year. And I'm just using that as a number. So we can't use that split today if we're going to support the rebuild of that tunnel. Is that correct? Is that how you see it?
So, Mr. Chairman, and I think Jason can wade in here, the application's just going to request a project budget. It would be when we start to flesh out that, when we get to that November meeting, as to what that ratio is going to be, whether we do a prorated share with Nebraska. That's when we start drafting up that omnibus water bill. But I think for the important thing now is they get a request in for, if it's a $15 million construction budget, that's the important thing that we get in now. As we start to develop, hopefully as we gain information, by the time we get to November, we'll have a draft of the budget, the omnibus water bill. That's where we start to figure out prorated base. We're only going to pay for whatever that 75-25% blowing a Wyoming share of that. That may be the money that's in the legislation that moves forward, though then it becomes incumbent upon Nebraska. But I think all of those details will be something that the staff can work with those that will be brought back to the commission and the select water. Jason, your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, so there's several things we're kind of mixing terminology and kind of causing maybe confusion in my mind anyway. Real quick, so I think the breakdown, just what I've heard, is 49-51, 49 Wyoming, 51 Nebraska. In response to Senator Driscoll's comment, you mentioned a level one. Level one in our terms is planning. And I don't think that's what you mean. I think you mean design. Okay, so design would be under our level 3 construction process. And you mentioned 100%, covering 100% of basically design. I think, yeah, that, or I think statute limits us to 75-25 on that. And it sounded to me kind of like, well, we should maybe phase this. Maybe this go around we fund the design. Next go around we fund the construction. Now, timing wise, we're talking about September 1's when they get their application in. We have to go through the legislative session. The money's not available till the March meeting of next year, so 2020. The Goshen Irrigation District, we would put together an agreement with them. They would then have to go out and hire their consultant, their engineer, to design it. I would say it's a pretty tight schedule to hope to have a design done between next spring and next fall when they shut down the temporary tunnel again. That's a very short time turnaround. To be able to go to construction in fall of 2020, I don't know, unless they're working on the design in advance and we get into the reimbursement situation again.
Mr. Chairman, I do think that's probably more of a realistic scenario. Keep in mind the tunnel is still the property of the Bureau of Reclamation, and their engineers are involved with that.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that is a whole nother level that we need to consider, because in all the Bureau projects we've ever worked on, they're heavily involved through technical service agreements and everything else and reviews, and for us to think we're just going to go design this thing and they're going to just accept it
Well, the
and do
fundamental
that in a
difference
6-month period.
is this is
Good
the
luck.
disaster. The other processes that we've been engaged with were in the planning and future projects. So, but I do agree that there is a whole logistical issue, and most likely, given the construction scenario, if there is an engineering fix and it goes through that process, we very, very well end up with some special modifications in the construction bill that is more of a reimbursement component than an upfront. But I guess I guess right now, I think the important thing is that we get an application in, so we start the process. This is going to be a long, protracted, and you know, we're trying to foresee right now, let's let this process start to work through, see what we come up with. But I just want to make sure that this is something that's on everybody's agenda and know that we're going to deal with in the next November meeting, and then in the December meeting, and then in the legislative session. And then it may very well get kicked back to the commission and the Water Development Office at some point in time. We can second guess and hypothesize and prognosticate on what may or may not happen, but I just want to say, let's start the process.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly why. I think action, even if it takes a different path, is necessary as quickly as we can do that. These guys are hurting. I'm hearing from them. And they're frustrated over the exact talk that we just had, is there's so many variables at play and it's grinding everything to a stop. And at some point, somebody's got to stick their head out and start taking action, and that's going to make BUREC move. As soon as the action comes, then they'll move. But right now, everybody's kind of sitting watching a slow motion disaster getting worse because there's no action happening. And that's what I see. And I feel for them because I've been in those situations before. And what you really want, as much as anything, is for somebody to try to do some action, even if it doesn't work. And that's where I stand, is I think this committee really needs to do everything in their power to start that monstrous ball moving, and it'll take turns. Bureco, they'll definitely stick their head out as soon as we take a step, they're gonna move. But right now, we don't see much action out of them. They're talking maybe 30%, but they're not even answering calls hardly at this point from what I can see. And it might be 2025 if something doesn't get moving. And irrigation water's not like anything else. It's time sensitive.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I am a terrible linear thinker. I got to go A to B to B to C. To me, and this is more for my own edification, we have two issues. Short-term fix and the long-term fix, okay? Now, the short-term fix is going to be harder for this program to address. Nonetheless, I think we are interested in, quote, the cost of the short-term fix in our elaborations on ability to pay. We not know what they got into the thing so far and what assistance, if any, they are getting. And then let's talk about the long-term fix. I think, Jason, if we did a level 2 study rather than go to level 3, that would mean that we could do a construction-ready estimate at the end of level 2, of which they would be 100% grant.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to get at, and I lost it.
Yeah, that's a question, Jason. That would mean that when we went to level 3, if we go to level 3, we would know, just like we've known on these other projects, what the appropriation is, the contingency fund and everything to go to level 3 the following, the following session.
I can walk through that if you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And that was one thing I was going to ask was, this thing changes by the day, as we heard Wednesday, and we want to make sure long-term fix is the right fix. We may be limited on what that is based on what the short-term fix is. But so if they came in, well, again here, March 1 of next year, right now, is the deadline for planning projects. But we've had Crook County, for instance, last year that came in kind of after the fact, and we made an exception and tried to get him into the consultant selection process to get him into this year. So there's potentially an opportunity there.
Mr. Chairman, we've done that before, and we don't necessarily have to have March 1. We can be effective immediately on signing an omnibus. We did it with the Gillette Water Project. All we have to do is upon governor's signature, that can get released and moved. We do have to go through the session.
Mr. Chairman.
But
Senator, he's talking about the application timeframes, not the signature on the timeframe, so.
where I'm at is we can go around application timeframes on an emergency basis. This is, I've pointed out, we're the legislature. And you can subvert the rules via the omnibus bills.
Mr. Chairman.
I do have one point to make there. Jason, you're going to have to put on your bib and tucker, I think, and go to the Golden Dome and talk to Governor about what we're doing to make sure what we're not in cross purposes with the 5 elected officials and what they're thinking. So I think we need that input. So you look very nice. I'd suggest you wear the same outfit and go talk to the governor and say
The Nebraska hat at home.
Because he has been talking to the governor of Nebraska. He has been. He's a member of the SLID board. I think he would be interested to know once we get our arms around what we're thinking about doing, that in fact you give him a briefing about the discussions we've had today.
I'm in full agreement with that. I guess my thoughts, though, and that's I wanted to broach with everybody, is we're trying to fit within the rules, and I agree with the application. But the truth is, via the bill, we can do whatever we need to do and we can do it immediately. And this is worthy of that. I'm going to tell you from my end, I'm willing to stick my neck out. I did it with the Gillette deal and say, look, we're going to go outside. We're going to work with staff. We're going to work with the governor. But we're going to try to keep Goshen County as whole as we can, as best we can. And that doesn't mean they get a grant for the whole thing, and it doesn't mean it's easy, but it means that we stretch ourselves as far as we can to get a solution as quickly as possible. And I think that's appropriate. If it was my irrigation district that this was happening to, I would expect my legislator to do that for me, to say, this is not a normal process that you apply for a water tank 3 years out or a canal lining. This is right now, and it's an economic impact on the state of Wyoming. Goshen County drives a big part of our ag bus. So for me, I brought it up for the reason that it's pretty shocking to people a lot of times when you go outside of the normal rule process. But there's times, that's why we have elected bodies, there's times you go outside of that process to get outside of the inertia of government. So
Thanks
that's
for
my
the comments, Senator Driscoll. And I'd call on Dan.
Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner Purcell, with your experience, is it wisdom to have that application in September 1st, keeping in mind that the 5 elected could come up with some emergency funding too, but shouldn't we have a placeholder in there?
Mr. Chairman, if that was a question for me, yes. I think September would be great, but if they can't act that fast, maybe October or November, if we are going around just so there's a meeting
Just so they're working on it.
before the session that we can hear what they have to say, so, but I'll leave that up to you. But I do think we need a placeholder with an application.
And Jason, I would add, it's been a while since I saw an application. In your mind, do we have enough information, or do they, to make a formal application? Is there enough information there?
Mr. Chairman, the bottom line of an application is how much money they're asking for. So my gut reaction is no. I think we're going to know what they're asking for in general terms. We already know that.
You can work, you can make the application work with the knowledge that you've seen or heard from the irrigation district, correct? Will
Mr.
that
Chairman,
work?
I think we understand the situation. The bit of a difficult part would be if they're going to apply for, let's just say the number's $15 million, how do we consider every other account 2 project that comes in on September 1? And obviously, we're not going to have $15 million to spend out of account 1. It's not too far off now that we're going to move the $7 million over. But that's just one project. We already know we've got a $5 million project that's applying. So trying to budget we're going to recommend and who we aren't, not having a good number, that's going to be difficult. But
Okay. That was my concern.
they'll get their foot in the door by providing an application. It'll most likely be an incomplete application. That's just a check the box. They're in the door. And we can work with that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Menezes.
Josh, would you mind sharing our discussion yesterday that we had about, I think Senator Steinmetz is going to SLIB today, and the discussion we had and what's all going on there, if you don't mind.
So, Mr. Chairman, and again, I don't know full details because it's a slid matter, but they are meeting at 10 o'clock today for a couple hours to talk about a couple options. I just had it up, but they had the mineral royalty grant as a possibility, and then Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan. And how that will result, I don't know. And as we discussed, and from some of the discussions on Wednesday, whether there were some emergency funds available. And again, there might be some pots of money that the governor or other agencies could possibly get to, but then it's complicated by the ownership of the project. So since it's Bureau of Rec.
Or maybe just maybe me, understands is that these guys are still in shock. They need some comfort food from us. Just us to come alongside of them and reassure them that we're doing everything that we can. I don't think the short term is going to be very favorable. I'm afraid they're going to find a lot more worse things in that tunnel when they get further down the road. I would be very surprised if they're able to operate that this year at all. And that's being as frank with you as I can from looking at the situation. But these guys are in panic mode. They're doing everything they can. They're bouncing off the walls everywhere to try and get any dollar that they can get to try and keep going to see what the problem is. And that's, to me, that's the problem, where they're going to keep coming up with funding to find out what the real problem is to get through this year. I'm totally assured that the long-term thing that water development and the select water can help with, but this short-term thing right now is a real toughie. So.
Mr. Chairman? Go ahead, Jason.
I want to, Mr. Chairman, talk about what you just kind of mentioned, the short term versus the long term and the timing, because I think that's important. I think they feel like they need to have a long-term fix going into the next irrigation season. And if we're talking about doing a level 2 planning project to determine what the best fix is, I just want to run through this. So let's just assume they come with us an application. Yes, it's after March 1. We make an exception just like we did on Crook County. We can get a consultant hired by next March or May 2020. That consultant's not going to be able to get information on what the situation is right away because they're going to be running water through that thing shortly. So it'll be next fall of 2020 before they can get into the tunnel and actually investigate it, and then to come up with the analysis on what the best fix is going to be. Our best case scenario is going to be 2021 because they get information next fall, they work on the report, the answer over the winter of next year. They're ready with information in 2021. Let me think, is that right? Right. Ready for then a construction application in the fall of 2021. And then you go into the design, and then it's another year. So we're talking 2022
We're not
before.
talking about a level 2 planning
Well,
study.
we have discussed that, so I'm not.
Mr. Chairman,
What are we gonna do?
I am thinking about a level 2, but go ahead. I have a question on the level 2. Okay, the good part about it, it's 100% grant.
That's why I was.
The second thing about it, and attorneys help me, they have a perfectly good consultant that knows more about this than anybody in the whole wide world. So the reality is, could the level 2 funds be contracted with GID, with our approval to, it just seems to me like there is no consultant that's going to be able to compete with the consultant that's out there now. So I guess it would be a sole source or whatever you want to call it, that we could get the level 2 fund, get the preliminary estimate for the long-term fix. I don't think throwing $15 million at this session is going to be helpful to anybody, because I don't think we're going to get to spend it. But what we can do, if you think it would be appropriate, is give them the level, or we would keep the level 2 budget with the understanding that we might take some heat from it, but our consultant through GID is going to be the guy that's been out there and knows the problem. And that way we could start sooner to get the final estimate quicker. So then we and they wouldn't perhaps know what they are getting into. And I know that we also have other tunnels to look at. But I think this level 2 should be limited to the immediate problem, because it would just delay the completion of the report. I think what we really want is a good estimate for not this session, the next session, as to what the long-term fix is. And I think that's the most appropriate to do it. But throwing $15 million appropriation at it right now, we have no.
Won't happen. That's not gonna happen anyway. You've got me though to a spot, I don't think you're fast enough, but we've got money sitting in these accounts right now, and it's authorized by the legislature. And part of the problem is they keep spending money and we can't reimburse. Once they've spent it, it's on them. So I guess I'm thinking maybe back to your sole source, and that changed me a little. Maybe we ought to be authorizing even today or at this next meeting to go ahead and authorize them to start that study. You shaking your head, Mr. Chairman? I guess to me.
You can't, Mr. Chairman. We have no legal authority to obligate funds. That's the duty of the entire legislature. We can't just tell the commission and the office to go spend money on something. It's not within the frame of the law. It's the legislative authorization of expenditures, and we are a subdivision, not the entire legislature. So that
Right.
any authorization that would come would be a recommendation from this committee to the entire legislature. So we don't have that authority under the Constitution of the
Correct.
state of Wyoming. So
I have a comment too I want to make. We're involved with Nebraska in this particular project. There has to be an agreement. I heard 5149. Somewhere, do we have that agreement? Should we research it? Because if Nebraska, if we're going to send them a bill, they're going to know what we're going to do and the accountability of it. I would if I was Nebraska. Not wearing the red hat, but I would. So does that agreement have to be approved through the Nebraska before their entitlement would reimburse the state of Wyoming for any funds that were used?
So, Mr. Chairman, and again, we're sitting here and we're hypothesizing and we're prognosticating about what may or may not happen. And I guess we're going to spend a lot of time here. What we need to do just now is say, let's start the process.
At the same time, I
Getting
think
back
we
to
should
the whole
look,
question of the
I think we
$15
should
million.
look at that agreement too, at the
We,
same
as the
time.
state of Wyoming, let's assume that it was a $15 million budget. Wyoming's on the hook for 49% or 51%, whatever that is. And then, assuming that the Bureau of Reclamation does the engineering and/or comes up with some additional cost on this, however that works, whatever their contribution is, that's the 30%. So what you would see in the omnibus water bill, it would be a grant to the Goshen Irrigation District for 75% of that 49%. And then whoever else was contributing would be the rest of that money. And most likely that's what, so we're not talking a $15 million appropriation. At the very best, you would be talking $7 million. And that would be 25% loan under the criteria and the statutes that we can only go up to 75% or 75% grant, and then they could do a loan for the next 30 years at 4%. So you're down now to about a $5 million appropriation.
Mr. Chairman,
We're talking,
if I could, I think this session, the only thing we ought to go get, and it would be in the omnibus bill planning, a feasibility, would be called a feasibility study, but basically what it would be enough money to do a design and estimate for the big fix, okay? And then that way, that would be reimbursable by the state. I would not bring any construction money to the table this point in time because we don't know what it is. But then, rather than go through a selection process, seek from DIA purchasing a sole source approval with the governor's help if we need to. And as soon as the appropriation is granted in March, we could start the final design process for a permanent fix. and putting any more money on the table than that, and let's say it's a $300,000 to $500,000 level 2 study. We haven't got enough information to know whether it's 15 million, 4 million, 6 million, 100 million. But at least that would get us a start with our arms around the costs. And we could probably, if we get it done in March, or get them on the hired in March, they would have the tunnels accessible to them. And they should be able to put together a good report for the following session on the, quote, long-term fix. Now, relationship with Nebraska. We do know the state engineer from Nebraska. But the reality of it is the partners with GID on this canal are very worthy of, they've got some politics and politicians, and I'm sure that they have brought to their table. So the appropriation we seek could be based on reimbursement of 49% from the state of Nebraska for the level 2 study. We would then go to Mr. Fassett I can assure you don't need to look at the agreements. The agreements are in place that basically said what you said they say, 5149, and everybody's responsible, and they both pony up each and every year for operation and maintenance fixes. But so that's got to happen. But and then there can be the governor's offices. If this is the way to go, I'm sure we'll get that agreement in place fairly quickly. But anyway, I know it's not the big dramatic step, but it does get him in the foot in the door without us having a great big unknown $15 million shadow over the program.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we give the
Director
the authority to work with the governor and come up with a solution, and if we can get the thing in by August 31st, we can, or we'll work and suspend the rules and put it in later in September, and then leave the authority for the chairman to sign off on it. Because we're going to kick this bill around, we don't know what it is, but Jason and the governor and them will come up with the right, I think, what we need to fix the short term, and then we got to worry about the long term.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can.
Do I hear a second? That was a motion.
Pardon me.
I second it.
Okay, discussion. I think the reality of the intent of that is good, but I do think we can wait till November for them to we can act on this in November if the governor says, well, we could actually do it. When's our next meeting? October?
Mr. Chairman, that's not a Select Water Committee meeting, but
yeah,
it is a Water Development meeting,
yeah,
October.
That after we have all this input, it would be very easy to put that level 2 appropriation in the bill at that time when we're approving all the other funding. So we would like, you're on the right track, but I think we need, we're gonna need November, I think, to get through the politics of Nebraska, governors. So I guess if I might amend the motion to say we would encourage Goshen Irrigation District to apply for a level 2 study for the permanent fix on the tunnel, and that we would like to see that before the November meeting. And then at that, and I think we can leave the rest of that, obviously, we're going to put the burden on you to coordinate with the governor's office to better understand the relationship with Nebraska, which I think I do, but, I'm old and forgetful. And then open up that dialogue with your partners on the other side, that this is what you're going to do? And can they come up with their 49% for the feasibility study? With the idea that we are going to seek a sole source, because I just don't think, in this case, a consultant selection is going to do anybody any good other than delay time. So,
Mr. Chairman, just a quick, I guess, question for clarification. Commissioner Purcell mentioned that we want to come out of this with a final design.
I want to come out of this with a budget capable of seeking a level 3 funding project. There might be some additional sizing rebar and,
Whatever.
well, I'm not talking plans and specs. I want a good upfront level 3 budget for our consideration for the next session, for the long-term fix. The short-term fix, I'm interested in how you're doing. I'm interested in how you're doing with funding it. But it would take major legislative action for us to work in the short-term fix. And we'll leave that at the hands of our friends in the Select Water Committee if that's the way they decide to go.
Mr. Chairman, just so we're on the same page, most likely that determination for a budget for the planning study, feasibility level 2, is going to have to be based on conversations with the existing consultant, being an expert in this field, and it's going to be based on that. So they'll be somewhat in the driver's seat.
Mr. Chairman, I think you can tell if you're getting smoke blown at you. But I think you need to talk, when you meet with the governor, talk about this sole source situation, and that going through the Procurement Act would be just counterproductive and delaying us by a year in our ability to react to a long-term solution. So,
Mr. Chairman, just to throw something else out there, and it's probably not going to be feasible, but we also do allow for sponsors, not that they're going to have the ability to do this, to do their own study. They could start now if they wanted to and spend money and complete it sooner and be ready for maybe construction funding request next September. But again, it would be their own funding.
Mr. Director, have we really ever done that on a level 2 study? I know we do it on construction. We have the materials, they do the materials and we do the materials, they do the labor, that sort of thing. I didn't know that we've ever allowed a sponsor a contract for a level 2 study. Doesn't mean we shouldn't or can't, but I don't, go ahead.
Okay, what I would like to reintroduce, Katie, are you okay with the motion? What do you have? Because I think it's complicated. I know it was amended, so can you read that?
The amendment hasn't had a second either.
No, right. But that's why we'll go ahead and go into that.
For the sake of the minutes, I'll have to go back to my recording, but from my notes, I have that Commissioner Purcell amended the motion to encourage them to apply by the November meeting, so we have a better understanding of the relationship with Nebraska, for Commissioner Geis's motion to give the director authority to work with the governor for an August 31st, which was then amended to a November application.
Okay, with that, we did not get a second.
I made the motion.
You made the motion,
And you
So-
amended it.
and he amended it.
There was a second, Commissioner Lancaster seconded.
Oh.
And then we went in
Geis's
discussion,
second.
so we're okay with the element. But the second amended motion was made after the second.
Correct.
So now, should we bring up that amended motion and vote on it?
Mr. Chairman, the only correction I'd have for notes is it's a application for level 2 funding.
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yes, I do have level 2.
So we vote on the amendment first and then on the motion is
Right.
amended.
Okay, so all those in favor of the original motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. All those in favor of the amended motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Or do we need a,
We didn't get a
Didn't
second.
get a
we didn't get a second.
Didn't get
I need a second
for
on the amended motion. There a second?
I'll second it.
No? Commissioner Wagner seconded. Go ahead, Jason.
Mr. Chairman, with saying an application by the November meeting, if they show up the day before with an application, it's going to be pretty difficult to have a good conversation at the November meeting. I think we should, we'll work with them to move along as quickly as possible.
It's in your ballpark. You do whatever you want to do.
But yeah, we're not going to say if you don't get it in by September 1, you're out. Rest assured. And Mr. Chairman, just another point of clarification. So we are going to be looking for reimbursement from Nebraska on this level 2 study.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I think we will be, whether the timing of that reimbursement can be subject to agreement with the Nebraska counterparts. Then we'll have to decide if we're willing to foot the entire bill and bill them for it, or we're just going to have to ferret that out by November 1st to figure out how much, if it's a $500,000 study, 250, are we going to get the 500 and have them reimburse us? They're paying bills now. So hopefully they have a process in place that's getting money from both sides for the temporary fix, and we just need to understand that. And then you'll have to put that in your recommendation for November 1st based on what you've learned between now and then.
Mr. Chairman, it may be fairly loosely based what I know at that time. I know there's some, I don't know if it's uncertainty. I don't know if I remember this from Senator Steinman's discussion on Wednesday in regards to Nebraska paying for infrastructure in another state, but we'll figure that out. So,
Chairman, the whole thing is, we can create an omnibus water bill, and the legislature can come in and amend it that through March. I mean, they have the final say, as your select water committee has the final say on, and they can put amendments in on the omnibus water bill anytime they want.
Chairman, sorry, I wasn't listening. I was looking for the, real quick. So there is language in our criteria that says, and this is in regards to level 1 and 2 study cost sharing. And it talks about we normally do the level 2 studies, but however, in those exceptional cases where the sponsor assumes the role of lead agency in level 1 and level 2 studies, it shall share in the cost of those studies further if through, maybe I haven't found it yet. I know there's language in here that would allow them to go out on their own, hire a consultant, get the feasibility study done with us working closely with them, but again, they would pay for it. So I don't know if that's probably not a great option anyway, but it would speed it up. So we'll have those discussions as well, if everybody's okay with that.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, Director Mead, I don't believe Nebraska's gonna let 53,000 acres sit there and dry up. So I believe they'll come through with the money. I don't know how, but I think they'll fix it in their legislature so that that'll be taken care of. I'm not gonna sweat that part of it. So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Wagner.
Mr. Chair, just on one note, since we have both the committee and the commission here, as we're going forward, there was a discussion about sole source need. That may be something that would need to be built into the legislation, so we may want to keep that in mind. I'm not sure if the existing statutes that authorize sole sourcing would or would not authorize us to jump as quickly, but I don't know that it wouldn't be something that couldn't be in the omnibus bill as part of the provision. So I just want to put that out there so folks are thinking of that component too.
So are you going to look into that?
Mr. Chairman?
Whether it can be or not?
I apologize for interrupting. I would suggest we just talk with the governor about that.
Okay.
There's his right-hand man.
Mr. Chairman, it's covered under
Senator Hicks?
Article 10, Section 16 in the Constitution that says the legislature can fund all or in part. So it's really a legislative function at that time if we want to authorize for works for irrigation. We have constitutional authority in the legislature to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we did find the language in the criteria that says they can do their own study as long as we're accepting of it, so we'll have those conversations as well, but.
Now, we need to vote on that.
Call for the question.
Call for the question. Any other comments? We need to vote on the last, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. So we got that one under the belt. Now it's, the ball's in your court.
Mr. Chairman?
Whatever it's worth.
Yeah. So the next one that I
Senator
put
Hicks?
on there just quickly is maybe at and you guys may get an update at your October meeting, but that the Gillette Madison, the integrity of those wells, and if they have made a determination and it's done and DEQ has allowed them to come online, I think it would be prudent of the commission to discuss revision of that $17 million that's sitting in that Gillette Madison account, because it's not doing any good if the projects and the wells are online. So anyway, that's just a suggestion. Maybe you guys could take that up in October and find out and get a status report and then at least inform us, the select water, what's going on there.
Those funds will not come back to the commission, no, they will go back to,
Mr. Chairman, there's a number of funding sources.
Liz.
Brian, I don't know if you have the information with you currently.
Mr. Chairman, like Jason indicated, there's a lot of funds have come from different sources. I think we have 7 different appropriations for grant funds. Right now, we're using AML money. That's predominantly what's left in the budget. We had an account 3 appropriation that we've already spent, but again, most of the money that is currently still available is AML money that would be reverted back, I would assume, back to the AML program.
Mr. Chairman, if we just know what those, if the staff can provide those numbers and then let us know, then we can take legislative authorization. We may just want to select water committee, just move those AML funds into the water development account 1.
yeah. Be great, but I agree, I think there are several accounts there on the Madison that,
If we just get an update, it'd be helpful.
yeah.
Thank you.
And maybe an update on their completion too, if you can, maybe what's left, I guess, and not that it's totally in our ballpark, but it'd be nice to know if there's one more well, if they're still drilling, or what's really happening up there. Because I think it involves some of the other items that we saw the other night. Senator Driscoll and I were at a meeting, and of course, there's still some items there that may not, the people would just like to know, I guess. So, with that said, we'll move on to the next
The
item.
only other one, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I've got a letter here from the mayor from the city of Sundance. They are requesting, or will be requesting, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing. What I will do is forward the letter on to Director.
Look into your mic, we can't hear you over here.
I sent it to the whole committee.
What's that?
I sent it to the whole.
Did you send it to the Water Development Commission?
I believe they should. Just went to the committee members. I'll get it to you guys.
That's what I said. It's just, I will make sure that, I'm going to just go through this. There's a request from the city of Sundance for the tank that slid off in 2011. There was some FEMA funds that were granted through that from the Office of Homeland Security due to some, say, just breakdown of communications and lack of follow-up associated with federal funding. FEMA has come back and requested that the state pay those funds back. So they're asking that the city of Sundance, so the city of Sundance is requesting $288,750 to offset those costs of those FEMA funds that they now have to reimburse back to the Office of Homeland Security because they've withdrawn those funding from that project. So That will be a request coming from the city of Sundance, which the water development already had a 75% of the cost of that program in there. Again, this was one of those emergency circumstances, but because of this little thing called NEPA, they've withdrawn those fundings. But I will send that, forward that letter on to Director Mead. And
Would
then
be-
you guys can have that, and then maybe we can have a little more discussion at our November joint meeting.
I'm just curious as to what the reaction would be if we told FEMA to pound sand.
Mr. Chairman, that's been done and it happened, and actually, the bill's been paid. It's now a deficit on the state of Wyoming's Homeland Security is the truth, what's happened on this. The governor's been deeply involved in it, as have numerous others, because it was really what happened. The city of Sundance has never done a federal project. They did not know anything about having to go through the NEPA process. So when it got done, Homeland Security denied it. The governor's office and our Homeland Security went to FEMA and said, look, it's an oversight. They said, we don't care. You guys are stuck. Homeland Security can't take that kind of hit on their budget. They came back. This will result in Sundance is very near the top end of the water rates, I believe, right now for what they charge their people. It's going to hit them for another $7 or $8 a month, which basically in effect kills any ability for them to do any infrastructure work for a number of years. And this is a gift that keeps on giving. It just brings me to tears. My first select water meeting was to deal with the tank that slid off the hill, and that is, like I said, it's from 11 to 19. This is done, and hopefully this gets it to an end, but it's a pretty exceptional circumstance, and they're in a tough spot.
Jason, with that comment, Senator Driscoll, would that be considered as a reimbursable expense?
Mr. Chairman, that was exactly what I was going to bring up. The project's done, we'd be reimbursing not only that, if I don't know much about this, but I think we've granted them 75%. So if we then give them the other 25%, it was basically 100% construction grant, and I think that's outside the statutes of what we can do.
Mr. Chairman, just an aside, FEMA has some responsibilities here. They started releasing money without having all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, along with Homeland Security. But I'm sure you've already had there's been those discussions with FEMA, but it seems they have some culpability and skin in the game as well.
There's a lot of skin in the game all the way around. It also went through our Water Development Commission rules as well. Everybody missed on this. This is it's a shared deal, but the only ones I know that have stepped up and said we screwed up is the mayor of Sundance, and he has said, look.
Well, I recommend what's the consequences if you don't pay? What is it?
We already did.
It's already paid and done, and that's kind of where I'm at, and statutorily,
I mean, if you don't pay the reimbursable, they're asking the city of Sundance to reimburse. Would those payments already come out of FEMA?
Yeah, it's all done. Sundance is stuck. Their deal right now is, should the commission or legislature, and I do believe it's gonna take a part of the omnibus bill to fix this. It is outside of the scope. It's there. Without that, all that happens is Sundance's water bills go out the roof, and we've stopped their infrastructure. They don't have the ability to do any projects, because they don't have any cost share. Moorcroft's been in that boat before. When you are up against it, you're up against it. And we've seen this again, and it's one of those deals. This is the same type deal as the canal collapse. It's really nobody's total fault, but something has to happen. And that's why I came back to the 25%. Sundance has paid it twice, folks. They paid the 25% on the piece that slid off the hill, and they paid 25% on this next project. They did pay it the 288, it was 233, I think, is the amount they're actually looking to get back, but they've already paid their 25% twice. This will be the third time, which is, I'm guessing, and of course, each one's been a different number, but they have paid the 25%. They have had no 100% grants out of any of this.
So with that, we have no application for the funding through the Water Development Commission. This is only a letter. You haven't received anything, Jason, correct?
Mr. Chairman, there's no application to put in because it's outside of the scope. It's already done, it's already paid for.
So how, what was your recommendation on how you're going to
It
pay
was
it
as
through
much as anything,
legislature?
up front, you guys, I've gotten a little grief before about amendments on the omnibus water bill, and it's probably gonna be an amendment in the omnibus water bill that comes, and it's, as much as anything, I've visited with Chairman Hicks, it's full notice to this committee that I intend to do that.
We're not
So-
involved in that.
No, so when it
Okay.
comes, you guys don't fall over backwards and say, got Senator Driscoll out here galloping over the hill and we didn't know anything about this.
Okay, well, that clarifies.
It's kind of a fair warning that it's gonna come, and if you have extreme heartburn, please tell me, because Sundance is fairly gracious about dealing with this, you know, they realize they may have to do it. I don't want to run afoul of you guys. I've been here for a long time, and I'm not trying to anger the commission in any fashion. It's,
Technically, we have no control, so.
you don't, it's an
No,
amendment to the bill, and I did that once before, and
Sure.
Karen Bud Phelan had a heart attack over doing amendments without visiting with you folks.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the monies they paid, was it directly out of their pocket, or did they take loans, or how did they come up with that amount of money?
It's in that documentation, I'll have to look. I hate to make a misquote, but I think they raised their rates. I'm not sure they took a loan out.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know for sure. I guess my little bit of knowledge from just this discussion, but I would assume that we gave them a certain amount of grant money. The other share was FEMA money, or FEMA now wants their money back. So I guess we'd be paying Sundance, and then Sundance would turn around and send the money on to FEMA. Are you talking about amending in then, whatever that 25% is, into the omnibus construction bill as a new appropriation? Because there's,
Chairman? Yes.
okay,
That would be what we do, and no, they're not reimbursing FEMA at this point in time. Our Department of Homeland Security is going to force Sundance to pay it, and I don't know if that's already happened or it's about to, but loan, no loan, anything, they want their money back. And so the ultimate bill lays with the city of Sundance.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I'm going to end up having to write the bill this year, but it's possible. It would be easier if we just had them apply, possibly, and then I know it's coming. I can just write it into we can discuss it
We're
in
taking-
November.
I'll get that done for you.
Again, based on statute, the recommendation may be do not fund. You guys can then overturn that and do whatever you want. But then I can just put it into the bill rather than
That's perfect.
rewriting the bill at the last minute.
Mr. Chairman, just as one commissioner, I would be a lot happier if the request was for a 25% loan at 4%, because we don't fund anybody 100%.
Mr. Chairman, Director Purcell, that's my recommendation is it's 75-25 would be mine. I'm not asking them to get it all. It's, even though they've already paid it other times, it would be a 75-25.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest, Senator, that let's keep this among ourselves about what you're going to do. I think there's still some opportunity for Homeland Security to provide some relief without us. So through the governor and whatever, you said it's on the plate. Maybe it's the 5 elected officials. Maybe the SLIB board would give them the loan. Actually, SLIB board would give them a loan for 2.5? Yeah.
12%.
Yeah. So they could get a loan from SLIB and keep us out of the whole mix. Because this is the kind of projects that we have used SLIB funding for to match our grant. So, and you've got the governor informed and advised, and maybe that's the decision he's going to come up independent of what we're talking about today. So,
Chairman, well taken. I think they've been to the governor's office multiple times, and that's why I'm here, is they've lost on every front they've been, be it Homeland Security, SLIB board, governor's office. and I'm happy to have a representative off the commission to visit with both the mayor of Sundance and the governor on it, because I am a third party. I'm upfront about that. I'm just trying to keep towns in my district whole. I'm gonna be honest about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think I've heard through the grapevine, I don't know if this is true or not, but that they've been to the SLIB and gotten denied,
Mr. Chairman.
probably because it's after the fact reimbursement. One more quick clarification. You mentioned 75-25. Now, are we talking about, they're gonna ask for a 25% loan because they've already got 75% grant from us, I believe. We're not talking about 75-25 on the 25%, are we? Because then that goes over the 75% grant again.
We're in the letter, and I'm kind of off my head. I believe original was 288, 233 was the part they got stuck on. And my recommendation would be that we fund 75% of the 233, and they're stuck for another 25. It'll be the third 25 they've paid, and they're declining balances, but in truth, they've paid 25% 3 times on this.
Mr. Chairman, again, if you then add up all the grant, you're over 75%, just so everybody's aware of that from the original grant.
I mean, just for ratification, it's outlined in the letter. SLIB has contributed 5% of the total project. Water Development Commission has contributed 72% of the total project. City of Sundance does have a little skin in the game already. And then, so the FEMA was 22% of the project, so that's where they're at. So we're not at 75. There's 3% left on the table, and there's the statutory provisions. And they have got a little SLIB money, but they could certainly, to the point of Commissioner Purcell, go back and ask for a little more for a loan if we decided to do something, but.
We'll get them to reapply. I'll put them directly with you, Jason. I'll just get the mayor or their representatives and do what's acceptable, because I really shouldn't be involved past what if you're shooting them in both feet, I'm probably gonna be back bulling around. Otherwise, we'll just get an application in and see where we go to.
I don't believe that we have enough history to do anything with it besides some thought and some support.
This was an information.
You guys, yeah, it's information only, so that's where I'm at too. I knew their tank slid off the wall, but I didn't know what was done about it. Anyway, any other comments about Sundance tank? Jason, you've got a scope of,
Mr. Chairman, I'll wait for an application, I guess.
okay. All right, we'll do the same. With that, I don't think there's any other items. Does anybody have anything to come before this commission today? And if not, we do have future meetings. Katie, if you wanted to give us some input of what those are and what they're going to consist of.
Chairman, the October 2nd to the 4th is the consultant selection interviews on the 2nd and 3rd, and then the commission will meet for consultant selection confirmation basically on that Friday. And then the joint meeting of both the committee and the commission is in November in Casper. We'll be meeting at Goodstein Library, LI 215 is where our meeting will be this year. And that'll be November 13th, 14th, and 15th.
You'll have reservations for everyone at the motel for the meeting?
Only in Casper.
Yes. Okay. All right. With that, I want to thank both the Water Development Commission and the boards that are here today, the attendance. And I think we got some things done, but I would therefore ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Been moved? Moved and seconded that we adjourn? Have you got those, Katie? Thank you.